Hey everybody, I'm
Bard Moda.
apparently. I'm the developer behind Incremental Retro Racing, and since I just wrapped up development, I thought it would be a good idea to do a developer commentary, sort of, while the game is still fresh in my mind. So this game is sort of a spin-off of a larger game that I'm already busy working on, so I thought it would be best to do it right now. So this game started as a test of a software scalar engine that I wrote in Unreal 5. And to all of you developers out there, yes, this is completely ridiculous. Unreal 5 is made for the latest graphics cards, for super 3D graphics and whatever. So writing your own software scalar sprite engine within Unreal Engine that runs on a CPU instead of on a GPU or a graphics card, that's pretty ridiculous. It's not necessary. But I had this idea for a game, like a classic Sega Superscalar engine. So I really needed this specific look. That's why I wrote it. I'll show you some footage while I'm talking. Here, I'll show you what the game looks like in Unreal. It's just a plain shape with a texture on which I draw all the pixels every frame. It has a few backgrounds that I move around, but there's no 3D road or landscape or anything. It's projection math. I just use formulas to draw the road and copy the sprites to the right places with the right scale and such. And in Unreal, you just point the camera to it and voila. There are some parts that are more closely tied in with Unreal, like the CRT filter effect. That's a large complicated blueprint with some shader code, but that's mostly it. I did make the game with a CRT filter in mind. Personally, I prefer the default settings myself, but please do feel free to change the setting or turn it off completely. That's totally up to you. Even without the filter, at my age, my eyes basically add a blur filter to everything. Might as well add the scan lines. I'll show some gameplay while I talk. Oh, and if you try this out, do not mistake this for a slow racing game. You start out slow, but the game really picks up speed. I'll add in some comparison footage here. Anyway, around the time I got done writing the software scalar, I wanted to string along a couple of friends, so I started this small spin-off game basically as a test. Unfortunately, working together never actually happened, so this is the result. That's why the music you're hearing is public domain music, and the sprite work I did is relatively simple. The music is awesome, by the way. You do really have to look for good public domain music, but I just listened to lots and lots of music while I was doing the pixel work. It also helps to get a better sense of the atmosphere if you do both at the same time. But as a solo developer, since you're doing everything, the game is really brewing and taking shape in your head, and you just have to keep up with it, which is just never possible, Ideas are so much faster than execution. I have endless lists of things that I want to do, so with very little means, focus becomes very important. This is also why there's no tachometer and no fuel gauge, for instance. They weren't absolutely necessary, so they got cut. If enough people want them, I might include them in an update, but also this game really focuses on the flow of racing. Unless you pause or enter the shop between rounds, you're driving the car. Even between the races, you're given an overview, congratulations and so on, but your car is still moving. The track fades out, the new track fades in, and on you go. So, for instance, if you add in fuel, then you have to think about what happens if you run out of fuel, because that would end the flow of the race. It is nice in games like Top Gear or Top Racer for the SNES, for instance, where you're competing and then you have to think about stopping in the pits to refuel and how long. But since there are no opponents here, it doesn't make too much sense. This is more like Outrun, where you race against time. But what happens when you run out of time? Well, you have to start over from the beginning, and because I wanted this flow, I wanted to just keep driving. So that's where the idea for the star bonus points came from. The more time you have left when passing a checkpoint, the more stars you get. And if you don't have time left, you can still drive, you just get no bonus, or less. If you want more points, you'll have to drive faster to make up time. So the game started out more like an easy outrun game. Game over was never really much of a consideration, and so I started focusing more on these stars, because it's something that you can easily do while driving. The racing and the stars usually have the same goal. You want to drive as fast as possible, it doesn't get in the way. So the bonus stars started to work as sort of a metagame. I'd add the bonus stars for overtaking cars and for driving near maximum speed, and I made it a bit more appealing visually and added sounds of coins. So it started to have this hypnotic slot machine or pachinko effect. And I was impressed by a game called Cookie Clicker, one of the first incremental clicker games, I think. It was created in 2013 by Julien Tiernaud, according to Wikipedia. So that's where the idea for the incremental stars came from. Of course, I needed to add some kind of upgrades, so this whole incremental system would work. So that's where the shop came from. I wasn't really sure of what the shop upgrade system should be, but I wanted there to be some mystery, and it also shouldn't be too much work, since this whole thing was just a test for the software scaler, remember? And I always liked the shop from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast. So it would, in that game, it would pop up a few random characters and color variations that you could unlock with your points. So I basically copied that from memory. But unlike in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the cost for items is not randomized. It's always the same here. Sometimes, I'd save all my points on a very expensive character or something, and then later he popped up for a much lower cost. And I sort of wanted the player to always be able to buy something at least. But, that could have broken the progression, so this way with set prices, the player at least knows what to expect. Anyway, with the shop existing, of course, I could throw in different cars and upgrades for the cars as well. And some options that slightly break the game, like being able to drive through a car or drive through road objects, etc. That sort of goes hand in hand with the whole incremental game idea, I think. So you want to go so high that you break the game in some ways. But going completely crazy would have added too much work for this game. I think the way it is now is fine. If you compare the slow basic start of the game to the end game, where you can, for instance, take a tractor off-road and drive through everything at turbo speed, it's already a little broken, so that's good enough for now. Another part that I skipped until now is the track generation. So, in Outrun, if you run out of time, you have to start over and race the same tracks again in order to get where you were. And I didn't want to do the same track again. So one of the first things that I did right was an algorithm or a formula that creates decent race tracks using the sprites and backgrounds I had drawn. That's quite a lot of work to get it right. Programmers call this procedural generation. So this way you could always drive on a new track that you hadn't seen before. I thought that was crucial, because yes, you may be able to get better flow if you drive 1,000 laps on the same track, but I'd personally get bored. I wasn't aiming for the Le Mans 24 hours race. I like some variation in my game. Also, procedural generation can be less work. I do actually have a level editor that allows me to manually place each road object on a track, but it's a lot of work to create levels that way. You do get nicer looking levels, I think, and I really would have loved it, but I simply don't have the time and money to do it. But it's something that I'm doing for the other game I'm working on. But so that's why I wrote a formula that creates roads and places all the objects and cars and stuff. A lot of developers do it this way, and that's usually called a roguelite game, because the game Rogue generated a different level every time. So this game is definitely a roguelite. It was even called Roguelite Retro Racing up until the last minute. Calling it incremental was a marketing decision I made. I'm bad at marketing, so I'm not sure if that was the right call. Anyway, so this track generation formula or algorithm has a lot of parts, a lot of decisions like how many curves should a track have, how strong should a curve be, how long, how many lanes should a road have, etc. Most of those settings I wanted to make available to the players, so I added them in the pause menu so the players could change the setting and then see the changes in the upcoming track. And to bring it back a little, the shop is where I decided to add these track generation options individually. Because for one, that gave me more unlockables in the shop, but also because the track generation can be a way of breaking or modifying the game in sort of overpowered ways. If I gave players full control over track generation right away, they could just make straight 30-lane tracks with no traffic and put a brake on the gas pedal. They could just leave the game and rack up stars, which sort of ruins the game. So some of the track generation options became more expensive items that you can't unlock right away. Also, I had to add the cars to the track, of course, and make sure they don't run into each other and things like that. They basically look ahead and try to move out of the way of other cars, but not you though. The other cars aren't actively trying to get in your way when they're in front of you. But one thing I always liked in the old Top Gear game was when you ran out of fuel just before the finish, and then a car came from behind and bumped into you, giving you a boost of speed. So we recreated that here. When there's a lot of traffic, you can definitely take advantage of it. But they'll slow down once they've bumped into you, so you can't just sit in front of a car and be pushed all the way to the finish. And collision is very simple. It takes about 80% of a sprite's width and compares that with your vehicle's width from the midpoints. It's fast and usually you have some leeway so you don't crash immediately on the first pixel. And sometimes this lets you slip right between two cars, even though it doesn't look like it. But some of the objects are not well suited to this, like the lamppost or the arches. You can't drive under them here. But in general, it does help with the flow. Also, this game doesn't have spectacular crashes like Outrun. This is more or even less pronounced than Top Gear. And a big crash like running back to your bike in Road Rash looks very cool, absolutely. But I wanted the player to get back in the flow as soon as possible. Anyway, so we made a lot of things. We got endless tracks with cars and objects with collision on them, and a metagame with stars and a shop. So the goal of the game became to simply unlock everything in the shop. But that meant I also needed a lot of things to unlock, so I added a lot of vehicles. It's always nice to have some variation. Basic properties of the first car were always there. Having multiple vehicles just allowed me to change them. So I made them visible and upgradable, like the maximum speed, acceleration, handling, friction off-road, etc. In case you were wondering what the first car was, that's no longer playable in the game. But you can see it in the background when setting the CRT options. It's the blue car. So drawing a lot of vehicles took a lot of time, which I didn't have. So I had to choose between adding more vehicles or adding animations for each vehicle. Adding the most basic animation would already cut the number of vehicles in 3, which is why I decided not to animate any of them. It was a tough decision. I did program an animation system into the software scaler and it's running, but we'll have to wait until next game to see it in action. So that's how we got about 38 vehicles. It was to fill up the shop. I didn't want to pad the game with having to buy upgrades for each vehicle separately, which is why once you buy a vehicle upgrade, like increased maximum speed, it will apply to all vehicles. That's what those red bars in the stats are. And if you unlock everything, a special item appears with which you can see the credits, which is very much inspired by the Capcom vs SNK 2 ending that you get after beating Shin Akuma or God Rugal. So that's there to give you some closure. But of course the game will keep making endless tracks. Some can get very weird, especially if you set it to extreme values. After playing through the game well over 20 times, I still like messing with it and just seeing what it comes up with. So I hope you get some enjoyment out of it as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to read and reply, but if I'm slow, please keep in mind that I'm already busy working on the next game. Thanks everybody. Peace. Peas, green peas, black peas, white peas.